essentially, there's been some crazy, I guess, vibes going on lately. I'm just gonna start from the very beginning, so I don't lose track of what thought I do have. So, essentially, people have been feeling there's been this looming gloom and doom for quite some time, and I have pinpointed. Well, it's not that I didn't know previously, but I'm starting to reflect a little bit more, hence the whole retrograde planet marathon going on. And I'm starting to piece things together as to exactly why these kind of feelings are coming up and symbolically how they're represented with the transits. So Neptune square Saturn has been obviously a huge thing. I've been talking about that more on a physiological or like a literal level, which would be, issues with contaminated waters or resources, etc., and barriers and segregation falling or dissolving. That would be like government, factions, institutions, religions, etc., because remember, this is in Sagittarius and this is in Pisces, so spirituality versus religion. So that being said, let's not get too sidetracked. So Neptune is represented by the 12th house, Saturn is represented by the 10th house. This has to do with Pisces, also has to do with soul, spirituality, soul, spiritual plane. Okay. And then this has to do with Capricorn, which has to do with purpose and the actual existence. Essentially, it's associated with this as well, symbolically anyway. And if you notice here too, the curve here, this would essentially have ties to the South Node. So the South Node is supposed to be past life, and then this is supposed to be future, meaning potential. Fate, potential. Okay, so then we have, this is obviously the earthly plane, okay? So some associations that we have with some of these. So Saturn is associated with the lifespan of beings in general. It's essentially father time, and it also represents an hourglass. Well, that is not what an hourglass looks like, guys. There we go. So it has to do with, just our lifespans and everything. That's why, from 30 to 60 to 80-ish, those are common time frames that people end up passing on. So it's just kind of just keeping track. It's chapters in a book sort of thing. So the issues that we've been having is that last summer, I believe it might have been July or it was August of 2015, we had our first square with Neptune square Saturn. So that's, it obviously didn't hit everybody all at once, but that's when people started to have some sort of intuitive flashes or some sort of Neptunian intuitive signals going on, saying that like they sensed that something was wrong. They sensed that something was wrong because obviously with Saturn associated with Capricorn, Capricorn is associated with the dead of winter, the winter solstice, right? So what's going on with nature during the winter solstice? Everything is dying, right? Okay, so essentially the animals throughout nature know when winter's coming. They can sense it. So essentially, in a symbolic way, we sense our major winter to the point of human existence coming. That's putting it lightly, saying that basically there's going to be some sort of catastrophic change. There's going to be some sort of cleansing of humanity. There's going to be some sort of extinction, unfortunately. That's pretty much the realistic standpoint of this. So recently, beyond, obviously last summer, it started about March. We've had Neptune with, I believe it was the South Node, so that would be with Soul. So that would explain us having some sort of like intuitive kind of connection with either the spiritual world, which would, the spiritual realm, which would be the 12th house ruling, basically whispering things in our ear. And technically our Neptune is supposed to be our subconscious of our psyche, which is Pluto, and also our cognition, which is our conscious mind, which is Mercury. Which Mercury is supposed to be the association with man, connected to the divine. There we go. So we've been having, I'm not get sidetracked here. We've been having this opposition, obviously, with Jupiter in Virgo, and then we've obviously had the North Node over there with Jupiter pretty much like locked up there. And then we also have Chiron, which is supposed to be our weakness or our wounded heel, our Achilles heel, over pretty much hovering around with Neptune. So this would mean that we have some sort of spiritual karmatic weakness, or that we are so far away from our spiritual identity that we're clinging to the physical world. So for a few months now, at least back into March, I believe, we've been having Saturn and Mars hovering around each other because they've obviously both been in Sagittarius. This would be actually towards April-ish, I believe, for Mars. So obviously we've been having this square. So that's been an existing thing even before Mars came into the picture. And then we have every now and then had a square with Jupiter and Saturn. So this is essentially the T-square that is the floodgates. So when the Bible references flooding, when Nostradamus references Jesus flooding, and when other ancient texts references some sort of massive flooding, they're talking about this event. Particularly, I would assume, the square between Saturn and Neptune. Now, with multiple different transit or ingresses or alignments, there is the actual alignment, and then there is the triggering alignment that causes it. So the stressful aspect that would unleash the floodgates, essentially, in a symbolic term, would be this T-square. It's been going on since, I would say, March, and it will continue to go on into August. Obviously, them being generational planets, all three of them, as a matter of fact, the effects will not be completely full-fledged out by the time it reaches August. I think it's August 12th. It'll again be similar to like the Uranus-Pluto square thing, which is still unfolding now. Which, this obviously plays its part in it. And this is what the whole Bible meant by Armageddon and everything. And I always think it's funny when everybody says, oh, the world didn't end in 2000 or 2012. I'm like, okay, so when were any of you great at being able to recollect some sort of math equation specifically down to the exact fucking number? That's my argument there. Exactly. If you cannot hold yourself up to that standard, what makes you think that your ancestors could be held up to that standard? So therefore, everything is delayed, and it's very, very naive to actually try to pinpoint exactly to the exact moment and second that there was some sort of trigger or instant event that would happen, especially since, creating time and clocks and all that stuff has been kind of a work in progress, So, yeah, this is basically fucking Revelations, as I've been talking about, and that's why everybody's freaking out. And specifically right now, because there's all these planets that are retrograde, this is what I actually was trying to get at. So, here's the hierarchy of the brain, okay? So your main cognition, like your thoughts that you can create right now, is ruled by Mercury, okay? Mercury is supposed to be just your immediate thought process. If it's retrograde, that switch is off, okay? So lights out. So then your default would be Pluto, which would be your psyche, or your defense mechanisms, or essentially what would be the subconscious on a Freudian kind of psychoanalytic level. So say this one's retrograde. That means that the switch is off. That doesn't work. So what does your mind default to? It's backup program, essentially, would be, in theory, Neptune, okay? Which is your subconscious. So that's deep-rooted subconscious. That's not something that most people can tap into. Conscious. Oh my god, screw it. And Mercury retrograde, if I spelled it wrong, fuck you. And so this also has to do with your intuitive. And it's also, depending on who you ask, your spiritual connection. Okay? So this is like, if lights are off up in your head, and then your instincts are gone, then if you were to have a soul, essentially, this is the soul. The soul is your plan C, okay? So since Mercury, as well as Pluto, are currently retrograde right now, and Neptune is the only one that is direct, meaning that it has the reins, that would be why people are feeling a lot more intuitive flashes, or they're feeling a lot more like just this feeling of random raw emotion that they cannot explain. They don't know where it's coming from. They don't know what it means. Because imagine your soul always in there, but it speaks a different language than your Mercury and your Pluto. Okay, so your life struggle is to figure out how to be able to process and exchange ideas with something that doesn't speak any language that you've ever been familiar with, which I actually think is an interesting theory and potential speculative argument with exorcisms and possessions, but I won't even go there. But anyways, so essentially, that is what we're dealing with right now, because Pluto was retrograde first, and now Mercury just recently went retrograde. In fact, Mars, Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn. What am I forgetting? I'm retarded. Mercury. Oh god, see, the air comes back sometimes. I am an air sign. All these are retrograde right now. So all these fuses are switched off. So you don't have your drive. You don't have your essentially that's supposed to be like your fight or flight response, kind of in a way, for the greater good, kind of survival, like sociological survival. And then this is supposed to be your psyche, and then this is supposed to be more or less your internal clock, and then this is supposed to be your mental capacity. Those are all freaking gone right now. So all you've got to work with is your Neptune, essentially, your sun, your moon, and in theory, these three can cohesively work well together. So this is supposed to be your soul, or your feelings. This is supposed to be the core self, and this is supposed to be, obviously the phone between your soul. So that is why everybody's feeling this deep looming kind of what's going on kind of thing, and it's going to get more intense. You are actually now starting to actually feel the raw energy of the clusterfuck Armageddon revelation stuff that I've been ranting on about for the past year or so. You're now going to be feeling the full ramifications of it as I have been feeling it. So when people ask what's wrong, nothing's wrong per se. You guys are just catching up to what I've been trying to explain to everyone. I mean, but don't take it personally. I mean, because me knowing it hasn't really done anything to stop it. I think it's more of an accepting thing at this point. And I don't know why I'm suddenly sounding like a smart asshole, but acceptance is pretty much our only card to play at this point. And I think that's pretty much like what I got going on, and I think I'm getting way too irritated with my phone to even be serious anymore and not be an asshole about this, so I'm gonna go. Awesome talk. Right, Geezy?